Getting rich is not just about luck, and happiness is not just a trait we are born with. These aspirations may seem out of reach, but building wealth and being happy are skills we can learn. Today, I'll introduce you to a book called The Almanack of Naval Ravikant. The book has a subtitle, A Guide to Wealth and Happiness. Of course, it's a bit unrealistic to expect that a book of about 100,000 words can provide wealth and happiness. However, there's a reason why I find this book especially worth interpreting for you. The author, Naval Ravikant himself. Who is Naval? He's a Silicon Valley angel investor and entrepreneur, born in 1974. Although not very old, he holds a senior status in Silicon Valley. He has invested in hundreds of companies, including well-known names like Twitter and Uber. He also has a wealth of entrepreneurial experience, having founded dozens of companies, which we won't go into here. In short, he is the epitome of success. However, you may find after reading this book that of all Naval's roles, being a businessman is the least emphasized. In fact, there's not much about how to make money. So, what is the main focus of the book? We need to talk about Naval's other roles. Firstly, Naval is a profound reader who has read extensively. He has unique insights about reading and learning. For example, he doesn't read bestsellers, avoids joining any so-called book clubs, and shuns seeking social validation. He also mentions that one should not chase the quantity of books read. Counting the number of books read is merely a vanity metric. In reality, the more knowledgeable you are, the more independent your thinking becomes, and the more books you'll find unfinished. Hence, don't aim to finish a certain number of books. Instead, always focus on new concepts that reflect trends. Another example is how to determine if you've truly learned something. Naval believes the standard is simple. If you can explain it to a child and they understand, then you truly understand it. Secondly, Naval has a deep understanding of life. For example, when asked what retirement means, he says that retirement has nothing to do with age. Retirement means no longer sacrificing today for a perceived tomorrow. If you live in the present, you are already retired. Another example is when asked how much money is enough. He replies that it's when you can free yourself from the greed for money. How do you achieve this? Not through willpower, but by setting strict boundaries for your actions. No matter how much money you make, do not upgrade your lifestyle. Just having enough to live is sufficient. Also, when asked what a resume means, Naval says that a resume has nothing to do with where you studied or worked. A resume is a collection of the hardships one has endured. From these insights, many would want to jot down his words, put them in a PowerPoint presentation, and use them effectively. Indeed, many have done so. This leads us to Naval's third role. He is not only a social media influencer, but also a king of catchy phrases. If you look at many presentations, you'll find that young people love to quote figures like Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, Steve Jobs, Larry Page, and Naval. From this perspective, I think that for these phrases alone, this book is worth half an hour of your time, especially if you feel that other people's catchy phrases are already overused. Reading this book is like performing an intuitive spiritual yoga. It doesn't talk about any grand universal truths and doesn't give off a sense that the author is preaching from a place of success. Instead, the book maintains a very low profile. It presents all of Naval's thoughts about life, learning, and entrepreneurship as they occur to him. As mentioned, this book doesn't have a main theme. It's all about Naval's personal reflections. If we were to abstract a structure, it would deviate from the book's essence. So, let's proceed based on feelings and share some of the most interesting points from the book. Let me state in advance that the book is very enjoyable to read. If you find it intriguing after listening, I strongly recommend reading the original book from start to finish. Part 1. Let's start by flipping through the book. Your first impression might be that it resembles a life's memo pad. Why? Because every statement could stand alone as a wise saying. For example, many phrases could serve as a lifetime's epitaph. The book covers topics related to wealth, life, happiness, and so on. It seems like all the questions we care about in life are addressed. Although it appears scattered, if you read the entire book, you might get a vague feeling that the book is subtly conveying a truth about life. What is the essence of life? It can be summed up in one sentence that Naval believes. Life is not an addition problem, but a multiplication one. What does that mean? In the past, we thought of life as an addition problem. Why? Today I do a little, tomorrow I do a little more, continually accumulating memories and value for my life. Isn't that just adding up? But Naval believes differently. Life is more like doing multiplication. Every little action now multiplies by a large number, exponentially increasing the result. This concept might remind you of investing. Indeed, as an investor, Naval thinks about his entire life this way. Investors are very attuned to multiplication because in the investment field, making a small right decision can yield incredible returns. For instance, the book mentions that being 80% correct in decision-making, as opposed to 70%, doesn't seem much higher, but the returns for the 80% correctness are hundreds of times greater than for the 70%. This principle applies not only to investing but also to many aspects of our lives. Why? Because the structure of the world is a network of interlocking layers. In each network layer, the resources you connect to are different. So, every time you level up your abilities, you tap into a higher-level resource network, which brings in more and better resources. Let's consider a concrete example. Suppose you are a watchmaker who currently can only manufacture gears of ordinary precision, receiving only very ordinary orders. But if you could make slightly more precise gears, you would not only attract similar brands but also open up a higher-level resource network. More prestigious brands, even luxury ones, might seek you out. Your overall brand value would increase, not just your order volume. C. A small improvement in your abilities equals tapping into a higher, more valuable resource network. The incremental value generated behind this will definitely be amplified by this network. Moreover, the degree of amplification will exceed your initial expectations. In the book, Naval provides another interesting example. Suppose you are the world's best deep-sea diver, able to go where others can't. What would be your gains? You might think, since I can dive deeper than others and undertake more challenging tasks, I could win more gold medals in competitions. But in reality, you could gain much more. For instance, imagine if a shipwreck full of treasure suddenly appears in the deep sea. Others can only dream of this treasure, but you have the opportunity to explore it directly. Just a slight increase in your abilities allows you to access resources that others cannot. We are all familiar with this principle. It's somewhat like the college entrance examination. During exam preparation, many teachers hang a phrase on their lips: "One more point, surpassing thousands." Isn't that telling us that life is like multiplication, where a little extra effort and small progress can yield returns that are not linearly scaled but multiplied at a much faster rate? Following this logic further, you'll realize that the entire book subtly advocates not to underestimate those small efforts. Many times we think, how can we accomplish something big? Of course, it requires a lot of effort, determination, and seizing a big opportunity. Faced with this massive task, many people feel intimidated and hesitate to act. But Naval tells you never to underestimate those small efforts. Just putting in a little more effort than others can make a significant difference in life, thanks to the multiplicative effect. For instance, a few years ago, many talked about the barely enough bonus, meaning when others are slack, sloppy, and careless, just being diligent can bring huge benefits. Let me tell you a story about diamonds. We've all heard the slogan, "A diamond is forever," first coined by De Beers, the recognized leader in the diamond industry since 1888, with over 100 years of history. But in recent years, a new player in the diamond industry, Lucara, has shaken the entire industry. The world's second, third, and fourth largest natural diamond roughs were all mined by them. all after 2015. Remember, the last time the world's largest diamond was mined was in 1905, 110 years ago. Why could such a newly established company achieve such remarkable results in just a few years? Why could they mine larger roughs that other companies couldn't? You might think they found better mines or resources, but that's not it. Their success stems from a small change. They used new mining tools. Many other diamond companies use mining tools that destroy larger roughs. This company made some minor improvements to their tools. Of course, some destruction still happens, but the probability is slightly lower. Notice, just this slightly lower probability allowed them to discover 3 giant diamonds and establish their position in the diamond industry. When talking about the multiplicative effect, we must also mention another term important to investors like Naval: compound interest. In the book, Naval specifically advises us to pay attention to the compound interest effect. If you have some knowledge of finance, you surely understand how crucial compound interest is. For instance, if you invest $10 with an annual return of 10%, you have $11 the first year, $12.1 the second year, and $13.31 the third year, which might not seem like much. But if you calculate using a 30% compound interest rate over 30 years, how much would you have? Not just 10 or 20 times your principal, but thousands of times more. You would get over $26,000. Isn't that a considerable return? In Naval's view, not just wealth, but almost all returns in life come from compound interest, whether in relationships, love, health, or habits. For instance, if a company has 100 customers and they grow at a rate of 20% per month, it won't take long for the company to have millions of users. Or if you develop a skill and practice it daily, even for just 10 or 20 minutes, that skill could eventually become your side job. Maintaining this rate of positive accumulation can lead to astonishing rewards. Let's do a simple calculation. If you improve by 1% each day, then 1.01 to the power of 365 is your total annual improvement. What is this total? The answer is 37.8. In other words, if you're willing to put in that little extra effort and maintain it for a while, the rewards you receive will be much more than you expected. Again, never underestimate those small efforts. Naval also reminds us that since life is a multiplication problem and we care about compound interest, one subject becomes especially important in our studies: elementary mathematics. In Naval's view, nearly all successful people are strong in basic math. Geometry, trigonometry, and calculus are less crucial for art students, but algorithms, probability, and statistics are essential. These subjects make you more sensitive to numbers, compound interest, and multiplicative effects. Okay, let's continue with Naval. The biggest insight he provides is that the world is not an addition problem. Our efforts in life are magnified by the multiplicative effect, giving back to us. So, never underestimate those small efforts. Each effort not only advances you a little further, but opens a new resource network for you. In other words, our lives are full of invisible doors. Just by taking a step forward, you can open a new door and enter a new world. In conclusion, the main point is, don't settle, don't give up, and never underestimate those small efforts. Part 2. Next, let's discuss other insights from the book. As mentioned, Naval isn't just someone who understands life and business. He's also a lifelong learner and avid reader. He loves reading and learning. So, let's talk about Naval's insights on studying and reading. Naval once said, "Reading is my first love." He also stated that reading is the best way to build one's mental models. Since reading is so important, how should we choose books? How should we read? And how do we judge if we've understood a book? Let's answer these questions. Firstly, Naval believes that reading is about being honest with oneself, not competing with others. Competing over who reads faster or who reads more is pointless. Naval says the better the book, the slower you should read and absorb it. Counting the number of books read is just to satisfy vanity. Ultimately, reading is not for showing off to others, but for shaping your own mental world. It makes you a more lucid thinker, allowing you to form independent views of the world. Therefore, Naval advises not to chase the quantity of books read and not to fear repetition. For example, if you're halfway through a book and suddenly realize you've read it before, don't switch to another book. If a book gives you that feeling, it means your brain is ready to read it again. So, keep reading, follow your feelings, and go with your reading instincts. How should we choose books when faced with many options? Naval has a solid suggestion. Start with classic works, such as those in mathematics, science, and philosophy. Mentioning mathematics might make some people hesitant, but it's important because it trains our thinking to be more rigorous. Moreover, in today's data-saturated age, understanding mathematics helps us not be fooled by false data and make more accurate judgments about facts. Besides prioritizing mathematics, Naval also advises reading the classics. If you want to understand evolution, start with Darwin. If macroeconomics, start with Adam Smith. Always begin with the early classic works. Why? Because Naval believes the value of reading is not evenly distributed, and the order in which you read significantly shapes your thinking. For example, the classic works and good books you encounter early on lay a solid foundation in your knowledge structure. This foundation supports you as you continue to build upon it. In other words, your initial reading choices are like programming the source code for your entire reading system. The books you start with influence your initial thinking, and once that foundation is set, it's hard to change. How should you start reading? Always choose the best, most classic texts in your field, those that have stood the test of time and scrutiny. Don't start with trendy or new books. Lay a solid knowledge foundation with time-tested classics. Okay, we've discussed how to choose books. In essence, start with time-tested quality books, as the first books you read often have the greatest impact. This process is somewhat like falling in love. People say your first love often sets your views on relationships. Reading might be similar. The first books you read can set your perspectives on reading, thinking, and knowledge. After discussing how to choose books, let's talk about how to read. Naval's reading method can be summed up in one sentence. The essence of reading is not about building walls but finding paths. What does this mean? Simply put, many people take reading too seriously, as if they must prostrate themselves before a book, treating every sentence as crucial. If they don't understand everything, they feel they are disrespecting the book and themselves, betraying knowledge. So no matter how difficult the book or how much time it takes, they feel compelled to understand every chapter and page. Naval thinks this approach is like building a wall in front of oneself. It's creating unnecessary difficulties. But should reading be about building walls? Of course not. According to Naval, the essence of reading is about finding paths. Essentially, reading is about navigating through a network woven from chapters of knowledge to find your way. If you don't understand a book, that's okay. Put it down and pick up another, following only your interest and what you can understand immediately. Isn't this process like navigating a dense forest of knowledge? You're not focused on knocking down the tree blocking your path, but on finding a way around obstacles. This approach allows you to easily build your unique reading system. What underlies this system? Your way of thinking and your entire knowledge structure. In short, don't struggle with a book. Reading isn't a task. It's supposed to be enjoyable. Don't fight your feelings. Make reading a pleasurable activity. Remember, reading is not about finding walls but paths. Follow these paths, and you'll surely open a new world unique to you. Lastly, we need to set a standard for understanding a book. Naval says there's a simple criterion to judge if you've truly understood. Explain the book to a child. If the child understands, then you've grasped the most universally valuable content of the book. Why? Think about it. What does a child represent? The most universally applicable values and the purest interest in knowledge. If a child understands, it means you've captured the most valuable content in the book. Ultimately, beyond methods, what matters most is the will to read. Naval emphasizes repeatedly the importance of reading, even saying the difference between people is not educated and uneducated, but those who love to read and those who don't. See how crucial Naval considers reading to life. There are many more insights like these about reading, learning, and life in the book. If you're interested in Naval or want to consciously collect some catchy phrases, I especially recommend checking out the original book. The original text is very accessible. You can easily read it during your commute over a few days. With that, we've covered the main content of the book. I want to share one more strong feeling you might get after reading this book. It prompts us to rethink what it means to be smart. Traditionally, we think of being smart as having a high IQ, always making good choices, a natural talent. But from Naval's example, you'll see what being smart really means. Naval didn't come from a privileged background. He emerged from a poor immigrant single-parent family to become a well-known success in Silicon Valley. You'll realize after reading this book that his intelligence isn't about having a significant advantage in IQ or thinking deeper and further than others. Instead, it's about consistently maintaining good thinking habits, including habits related to learning, success, and dealing with failure. He has always adhered to these good habits. What good are they? They don't bring massive success in the short term, but they make Naval a little better at many small things. For example, being honest and optimistic, working with people more successful and competent than himself, and spending time with happier people. These habits might seem easy, but maintaining them long-term, coupled with the compound effect of time, will bring significant returns. So, back to our earlier question. What does it mean to be smart? Being smart is not an innate talent, but a collection of good habits. Lastly, I want to share a reminder from Naval in this book. He says, 99% of effort ultimately goes to waste. At first, this might seem harsh. Why would it be wasted? And is it still worth making these efforts? Absolutely. This statement isn't meant to imply that effort is meaningless, but that all efforts will pay off in some way at a future moment. Like the movie Casablanca says, what you've done, the books you've read, and the people you've loved all make up your character. Sure, you might not remember everything you've read, but the principles from those books have likely become part of your thinking, helping you understand the world. Yes, life is limited. And what we need to do is find the most important 1% of our lives and give it our all. That's the essence of this book. You can click the description below the video to find the link to the book. Welcome to read it. You can also share this book with your friends. If you like the content of Daily Book Dive, click the subscribe button to stay updated. Your encouragement helps us continue bringing book essence to our community. Congratulations, you've finished another book.